now every day we're feeding this stuff, and he likes riding in the tractor every day, feeding the cows the oya beans, and he's pretty, yeah.
Okay, well, let's get rolling. First off, I need to apologize. I'm sitting in the only place open to the public in Winnipeg, I think, that has Wi-Fi working. So it took me, this is my 4th try at finding Wi-Fi. So hopefully I got decent connection here. But also it's very loud where I'm sitting. So I'm going to do my best to try and keep myself muted. I was just very fortunate this restaurant allowed me in to do the webinar. So hopefully my noise isn't bothering anyone too much, and yeah, we can have a great conversation, and it's starting to clear out a little bit here, so hopefully that doesn't become an issue of the webinar tonight. So as per usual, okay, guys, we had a ton of questions this week. So as per usual, I kind of gave the panelists a heads up as far as what farms are looking for, as far as just how to implement these practices on their farm. Gave them the same heads up as per usual. They don't have to be experts on any of this topic outside of Stu. The other 2 guys, this was their first stab at growing this intercrop. So I really just wanted to stress to them, just talk about your experience, and we'll have a nice conversation here tonight. So as per usual, the 2 best questions, I just got a text, early front runner for question of the night, but we'll get to it in the question time. If you guys have questions while the presenters are speaking, put them in the Q&A, not the chat. And then at the end of the night, I'm gonna very unbiasedly come up with my favorite question. First best question gets a jacket. Second best question gets this hat. I think we have other hats too, if you're after a different color. Yeah, so just wanted to give one caveat kind of before we get going. I am in a restaurant that closes at 10 p.m. Central Time, so we're going to try and wrap the webinar up about 9:30 Central, so that's 8:30 Mountain. So I know we've got lots of people from Alberta here tonight. We've got 1 panelist from each province, so a nice geographical representation of on the webinar tonight. So yeah, so we're going to get through the presentations probably in about a half an hour to 40 minutes, and then hopefully leave about 45 minutes for questions, because I know there are a lot of them. So these are our panelists tonight. My good buddy Darcy Stewart, you may recognize him from last year's corn intercropping panel. Stu's been screwing around with corn intercropping for a long time, so couldn't think of a better guy to BS with about this. Usually we're sitting on the tailgate of a truck having a few beers after the baseball game when we're talking about this, so this will be a nice change. We got Lyle Morgenstern from Loon Lake, Saskatchewan, and then Stefon Beechinor from Bentley, Alberta. Just chatting with these guys, seeing some of their pictures, really excited to hear their perspective on what they saw this summer. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown as far as concept and why this intercrop kind of makes sense. So what we're talking about is our Covers brand long season forage soybeans. Now, what makes a long season forage soybean so much different than a grain soybean? So both of the beans you see in this picture here are glyphosate tolerant. One of these beans is a grain soybean that we grow for cropping production here in Manitoba. And the other bean is a long season forage variety bean that doesn't hit reproduction for 110 days and takes anywhere from 200 to 230 days in very warm climates to actually produce viable seed. So the idea behind these beans is we want to keep them as vegetative as long as we can. Had a lot of comments from people in Alberta and Saskatchewan wondering what's the heat units on these beans. Very high, I'll tell you that, but it's irrelevant on this topic when we're just trying to grow plant biomass to improve forage quality. The reason why the heat units really don't matter a whole lot is the goal is to keep this plant vegetative. We're not trying to produce seeds with these soybeans. In fact, it's much the opposite. The longer we can keep that plant in a vegetative state, the longer that we can actually capture sunlight and produce root exudates to feed our soil biology. Of course, when we're talking about a vegetative legume, the soil biology that usually most people are interested in is rhizobium bacteria that actually captures free living nitrogen bacteria and then feeds that plant. So yeah, this is the idea. So this picture is taken the start of October on my farm. You can see the corn in the background. This is just a little 5-acre trial. I tried with the beans, but you can see the difference between the grain soybean that is stuck in the shovel there and what these vegetative these soybeans that stay vegetative all summer long, what type of a plant they actually turn into. So we get lots of pushback from conventional types talking about yield. Well, I was always told when we're mixing corn with any intercrop, it doesn't matter what we're growing. We're just going to screw the corn yield. So this is actually from dealers of ours here in Manitoba. This is Avondale Seed Farm at Reston. So these guys were incredibly dry all summer long. We were in their crop early on and saw the growth, and it looked really great off the start. It just needed to rain. Unfortunately, they didn't get it. So this is on the left, you can see this is field view data. If you've never heard of it, it's basically just a biomass calculator based on satellite imagery. It's a really amazing tool for performing trials on farm. So this happens to be a corn bean intercrop, but the same trial can be done whether we're testing nitrogen, cover crops, or fungicide. Just a really great tool to understand different practices, what effect they have on the crop. So you can see, I'm just going to flip through some pictures here. Obviously, the darker green is the intercrop that has the beans with it. So actually, full honesty, I guess is the right word. So these guys Avondale took this crop for silage, and just because the beans it was such a dry year, I think it was a poor corn crop as well. They didn't see anything as far as increased production in their corn silage, just because the beans were so small that they were staying below the actual header of the silage machine. But as you can see from the field view data, we are seeing increased yield even under very dry conditions. And we've got probably 10 different field view maps that look just like this with varying amounts of rainfall and conditions. So the idea is we sow the beans same time as the corn. I know there are some producers that are doing it, coming back and sowing it at V3, V4. But I think, in my opinion, the best results same time. The corn's going to jump ahead of those beans because of the long season nature of them. They take a very long time to establish, and then because they stay vegetative throughout the year, we're able to lower the plant population on the beans as to not affect the corn growth as much as we can, and then just use those beans to fill in the canopy as best we can, maximizing sunlight capture, increasing protein in the feeds, improving water infiltration, available grazing after the corn silage. And then of course, we're going to talk, or there's lots of curiosity as far as nitrogen reduction when growing the crop, and what the soil test is saying as far as residual nitrogen for the following crop. So I did touch on some of the benefits. I mean, this is a neat one too, just the capturing more sunlight. I mean, what we say with covers is this is real science, 96% of every plant is sunlight and water. And I always looked at a 30-inch corn row and thought, damn, those are too far apart. Surely we must be able to grow something between those rows. And it has been a long and interesting journey getting to this point. But yeah, just the idea behind it is we're capturing sunlight between those rows, getting that crop established, and then when the corn's shutting down, those soybeans are there, able to capture sunlight, able to capture moisture, keep putting on growth, and turning some of that photosynthetic energy into nitrogen. I guess a little bit for the corn crop, but a lot of residual nitrogen for next year's crop is the idea. So I know I forgot something. I've got a bunch of notes down in my notebook here that I see I didn't get to all of them, but that's why we got a 2-hour webinar to chat about this. So our first panelist of the night is Stefon Beechinor from Bentley, Alberta. So correct me if I'm wrong, Stefon. No, you don't have to correct me. I know this was your first growing season with the corn and beans. So why don't you tell us about your beautiful family there and your farm and your community, and then we'll get into your first corn bean intercrop.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Joe. Like you said, this was the first year growing the corn and soybean mixture. I've grown corn for I think it's about 4 years in a row, but wanted to try something different. Like you said, we farm close to Bentley, Alberta, which is just north of Sylvan Lake, kind of right in central Alberta. Um, Farm alongside my wife Rebecca, and then our son Tice is 4, and our little girl there, she's 2. So it was kind of the neatest part. You'll see in some pictures there. We spent a lot of time out in the corn, and as our young boy would say, he's not the best at talking, so he doesn't call them soybeans, he calls them oya beans. And yeah, yeah. So now every day we're feeding this stuff, and he likes riding in the tractor every day, feeding the cows the oya beans, and he's pretty about that. So
Well,
um
I mean, that's a great story, Stefon. Tell us about a little bit about your operation. What are you farming?
yeah, so we're smaller. We have 100 cow calf pairs, primarily purebred Semitols, and then we do a little bit of embryo transfer work. So we just actually had our bull sale last week, which was unfortunately one day when it decided that it needed to snow, but we need the snow too. So in the end, it turned out to be a really good day. So exciting times to be in the cattle business, and yeah, there's lots of people that are passionate about it. So
No
um,
kidding. I mean, after the last 20 years that we've been through, it's
yeah,
the crazies that are left in it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And when I say crazies, I mean in a good way. I'm one of them too.
yeah. So
Let's
no, it's
talk about those Oya beans.
yeah. So um, we seeded. It was, of course, like a lot of Western Canada. It was dry last spring, so we did get it seeded the earliest that we ever have. I think it was May 2nd, and what we did was, so we went in. It was 30-inch spacing, and we had the custom planter come and he planted the corn. And then we emptied the corn box. We didn't change the plates or anything, and we just dumped the soybeans in and did some math and some weights on beans to try and get the right population. And we actually got her dialed in pretty good. And then he just bumped his GPS over 15 inches and tried to aim right down the middle of the rows. And I don't there's some times where they got overlapped, which I was interested to see if that competition would play into it. And in the end, there was no difference in the corn height or the cobs, whether the plants were growing in line with the corn or right down the middle. So,
Really, that is interesting. And it's fun because it contradicts what I'm going to talk about when we're talking about grain. But that's
oh,
great. That's why we do
yeah,
these things.
yeah, and
Well, maybe talk just a little bit about the specifics, Stefan, about lots of questions about what's the right row spacing, what's the depth, seed temperature, like at May 2nd, putting the beans in.
yeah,
As somebody that was involved in selling you the seed, that seems pretty early.
yeah, and I mean, it's just year specific and how things look. Like I think by May 2nd last year, we hadn't had a frost for probably 2 or 3 weeks at that point. So the Pioneer rep where I get the corn seed from, he's kind of the guy that I ask and he said it was time to seed the corn. So that's what we did. So we had a nice black like soil there, so it warms up quick. And seeding depth, we kind of we didn't change anything on the seeder or on the planter. It was about an inch and a half or 2 inches we went for. um, I think it would be better managed or best management going forward, and I saw it this year with the dry year, was maybe rolling prior to seeding or after seeding, especially for the corn. And I think that would benefit the big beans as well to get some better soil contact on them on a dry year, because I did see some patchy emergence. And a lot of this is ground that I winter cows on, so there gets to be some compaction areas, and you could definitely see that this year that the compaction areas, they waited till they got a rain before they germinated. So, but no,
So
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
curious, Stefan, between these two pictures, there's probably a month and a half difference, something like that, or maybe a month difference.
Yeah,
I,
probably. Yeah, it would have been so probably the picture, just the newly emerged seedlings there with the two kids, like that would have been mid-May or probably the third week of May. And that second one, that was probably towards the start of July.
yeah.
So we saw a pretty significant, yeah, we saw significant growth just with the heat units and that on the corn. Like the corn, yeah, like it was the tallest corn when you do the knee high by the 4th of July. The corn was well above that, and the beans were above that too. So it was, yeah, a good year this year for us here. We did get, like, it was started off dry, but we had good rain from the middle of June to the middle of July.
So, Stefan, just like, what was your observation? I mean, you're obviously somebody who's willing to try new practices. I mean, you were one of the first ones to incorporate this. What were you seeing as far as like between these two pictures, as far as observations? Was it exactly what you were expecting, or was there something that didn't turn out exactly like the way you were thinking?
No, I think it probably overall, I think it was better than I expected. Like when, yeah, just like my original thing was to try and get protein in like an added protein boost in the silage, and in the end, it turned out to be more than that. Like it was all the additional things, and yeah, probably that much and more. Like probably one of my favorite things, and I did have some videos and sent to some neighbors because the neighbors were all pretty curious about what I was doing here too. So, but the neat thing was there was one day where it rained. I think it was, I don't know, 3/10, so not much of a rain. And the next day it was plus 28 out. And I went for a walk down into the field, and I walked through the headland, which you'll see later in the later slides that we didn't seed the soybeans on the headland. And the ground was just dusty and dry and hot and just, yeah, looking baked. And then as soon as you got into the soybeans, the mud's picking up on your shoes, and like, yeah, just it felt like it just felt better. Like, yeah. So I like that it's that canopy, and it's the conserving the moisture, and yeah, and
Well,
so
if you went back, we've been doing these webinars for, geez, I guess this is our fourth season, which is crazy to think about. But I remember I should really go back and find it, because when I was first intercropping corn with hairy veg, I went to a spot, it was like mid-July, it was like 35 degrees. Because the argument always is like, well, how much moisture is that intercrop pulling from the corn? So I went and I took my thermometer, and I held the thermometer, or the laser thermometer, on the black soil, like it was where the sprayer had double up. There was no vetch, and it was like unbelievable hot. It was like 107 Fahrenheit, something like that. And I walked over just 10 feet where there was a mat of hairy veg, lifted up the hairy veg, took a probe, and it was 70 Fahrenheit, essentially room temperature. So
yeah.
I often, I mean, I would love to study a ton of things, but I think that would be so interesting to see the difference between what evaporates and what would the difference be between that soil being hot and the evaporation that's taking place, but also how much moisture those beans actually using to grow. I understand the plant will take more, but I mean, you're still using moisture even if a plant's not using it, because the sun's going to bake on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, and so then I guess this is a picture skipping forward a couple months into the harvest. So, um, here, like, so we're west of Highway 2. Um, we grow about as short a season corn as we can find, mostly
What
just for
what did you what did you grow for corn, if you can remember, Stefan? We had a few questions about, does it
yeah.
matter the variety of corn?
Yeah, so this was like Pioneer 6909, and I think it's 1950 heat units. It is one of the shorter, like season, like shorter season, and like you'll probably see a lot taller corn in Manitoba and Saskatchewan than we'll grow here. And there are, like, this year you could have got away with a long, just for risk management. For us, it's kind of the safe thing to not do that. So, like we had some of this field down in the lower corners were down by a creek, and it got touched by frost on the 20th of August. So we don't want to push it too far. So and this picture is also a little deceiving in that those beans, they got to the point where they were so tall that they started lodging. So when you stand up, they are probably 4 to 5 feet tall, and that corn is about 9 feet up to the top. So it was a significant amount of biomass there. Um, the other thing about this picture too that's interesting is something that I had to do with the herbicide was I had a pretty severe lamb's quarters infestation. I don't know, never have had it that severe before, but the first pass of glyphosate didn't really touch it at all. And so I followed up with the second pass of glyphosate. I mixed in Bazagran, which I believe is about the only herbicide that's registered for use on both soybeans and corn. It did a nice job on on that lamb's quarter. It was getting to the point where it was almost tall. It was taller than the corn at that point. And yeah, good that I cleaned it up. And I do think that that would be something to mention for people who might have glyphosate, tolerant canola volunteer in their thing. And if you can't use Armazon in the beans, but Bazagran, it's not the best herbicide, but it does do an all right job at controlling some of those type of things too. So
we did have one producer that there's some areas in Saskatchewan, Manitoba for sure, with some glyphosate tolerant kochia that producer used a herbicide called Fierce, I believe, pre-emerge, and did a really good job on the kochia too. So yeah, that's a really good recommendation. The Basagram, it's not one that I had thought of before, but of course that would work. So Stefon, I'm just, for the sake of time, and I know I got a bunch of questions I want to ask about this one picture on the left specifically. Talking about weed control, I know, what was it, 22, I did a whole bunch of trials, like spacing trials with the corn, and spacing trials with the corn, intercrop, and you name it, there was fertilizer trials, the whole bit. But I noticed that land only got sprayed one time. And where I had the monocrop corn at variety of different spacings, but without the intercrop, the amount of millet and lamb's quarters that came in was just phenomenal. But where I
yeah,
had good coverage with the intercrop, I didn't see, well, there was no way that it was going to outcompete it, because that those soybeans were starting to get established. Just wondering what you saw. I mean, this picture on the left here, I think, tells a number of stories. I was telling you when we were texting the other day, Stew's field, when I came into it, the first time ever, it looked like this. The headland was just monocrop corn, and then you could just see this line in the field where it got green. So
yeah.
a couple questions there for you to digest, I guess. Did you see any weed issues or weed suppression with the intercrop versus the monocrop? And maybe a good question too, because this picture might be deceiving. What percentage of the beans do you think actually got in the pile, and what did you leave out there?
Okay, so I would say yes, I saw, like, in the monocrop, like, if you zoomed in, you could see some sticks of some volunteer canola growing, and there was no volunteer canola growing in with the soybeans. So I think they definitely suppressed it. And I guess on percentage wise, we did go and we cut low, as you can kind of see in that too. So we did get pretty significant amount of the soybeans. There are some that the headers will just push over and doesn't get in. But overall, I would say if they were 4 feet tall, we left 6 inches. So we got the majority of them in the silage. There's still a significant amount of leaf that's down on the bottom 6 inches though of those soybeans, and you can kind of see that cow there You know, we have a little bit of a fall pet calving program. So that was about the middle of September that the cows got kicked out of there. And they were just, well, I was a little bit nervous just without feed tests and that about what was going to be there. So I had a bale and a bale feeder, and it was pretty fancy first cut because, yeah, our first cut was in the middle of June when the stuff was 6 inches tall, and yeah, I was giving up. So it was pretty lush and green, and the cows picked the soybeans over that hay bale that was in a feeder. So, and I didn't see with calving and those, we have Fleckvieh Semitols that melt pretty heavily, and I didn't see them lose any condition. They did very well on grazing those soybeans. One thing that
Did
did
you
happen.
did you notice, sorry if you're getting to that
Yeah.
point, I was just gonna say, I mean, the vegetative soybeans are fantastic from a protein standpoint. But did you notice that were the cows using what was left of the corn stalks for energy, or were they going and diving into that bale, or what did you observe as far
Oh,
as the grazing?
I think they were pretty happy just to eat the soybeans. And like I guess then my next point was like that corn, the canopy of the corn. I think you'll probably talk about it, but it's amazing how it protects those soybeans. But once you take that once you take that corn away, they become pretty susceptible to frost. And you can kind of see in this picture that would have been probably a day after killing frost. And those soybeans did drop their leaves pretty quickly after that. And I thought that, it was going to be a done deal at that point. But those cows, like up to like it was 3 weeks after that, and they did, there's just stalks of soybeans, and the cows are still out there and just licking up the leaves off the dirt. So, like, yeah, they just pretty.
Yeah, I can attest to the same thing. It is unbelievable. I still don't know what the actual science is behind it, but you take a vegetative soybean that's grown in corn, and it can take -1, -2, no issue. It doesn't seem like it affects it all. The second you take that corn canopy away, and you can get -0.2, and those beans will start shriveling off leaves. I don't really fully understand what's going on, but it's definitely the corn is protecting those beans somehow.
So no, yeah, but I would say, yeah, like it ended up that little bit of grazing, like probably could have cut the corn a little bit higher and left a little bit more. Like that's what I'll be doing next year, is leaving a little bit more for grazing. I think that it's efficient way to feed cattle in the fall too. So
So what, maybe just, I wanted to ask everyone this question, and I should have asked it sooner, but what were you doing the silage with, and any issues chopping it?
so we had the custom silager has a smaller John Deere. Um, I was a little bit nervous. I warned him when I booked him about this project, and I gave him the option if he wanted to do it or not, and he said he'd do it. And they did have a little bit of, the only place they had trouble was when the corn and the soybeans were seeded in opposite directions, and mostly when they, I think, turning on the headland, that then they could get it that it catch and plug up the header. But at the end of it, I asked if they would be willing to come back next year if I did the same thing, and they didn't have any issue with it. But I also pay them by the hour, so yeah, it's not by the ton. So
Well, that's good to know. We're gonna have more questions talking about that. But great job, Stefon. If you want to stick around for question time, that would be awesome.
yeah,
But great chat, great points. Thanks a lot for doing that.
yeah, thanks, Joe.
So Lyle, if you we'll see if Lyle figured out his video. If not, his mic is working or was working fine. Lyle, you there?
Hello.
You can hear us okay?
Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah, okay, we got you loud and clear. So Lyle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us about your future farmers you got kicking around with you, and just talk a little about your community and your farm.
Okay. We are farmed by Loon Lake, Saskatchewan. It's a little town north of Lloydminster. I farm with my wife, my two boys, and my parents. we have the boys are 6 and 2, and they just stay in a tractor all day if they get a chance to. Yeah, we got a couple hundred head of cows, and we do some grain on the side of that too.
Cool.
There's
Well,
good fishing up here.
talk about your experience with corn, I guess, and corn intercropping. If you've got any experience out of last year, but obviously we're going to dive into your experience last year as well.
Yeah. So we've done corn for a couple of years, and this is their first year with the soybeans. I was skeptical because everyone said corn doesn't like competition, so I just tried it in 20 acres, and I'm definitely doing more next year. It
Yes,
turned out great.
You've well, we'll talk about that at the end because I know one of the questions was, what about those of us that don't grow Roundup Ready soybeans or Roundup Ready corn? So that is something
Yeah.
that I wanted to touch on. But talk about a little how the year was and yeah, some of the observations you saw, what was going on.
So yeah, I put a layer of manure down with this, and then had the soil nice and black. I seeded the beans with my air seeder a little bit diagonal from the way I seeded the corn, because I didn't want the beans running straight in the same rows with the corn if it worked out, because my planter is 30-inch spacings, my air seeder is 10-inch, and it all seemed to work out good.
So what like I see the boys standing in a couple here. The middle one looks like maybe wider than 30-inch, or is that just an optical illusion?
Yeah, no, I had a chain jump off right after I started seeding, and I didn't catch it. And I think both pitches are in the space where the planter missed. That's actually a 60-inch space right there.
So maybe just talk about your observation, Lyle, the difference you saw between the 30-inch and the 60-inch.
You could see the beans did a little bit better. It didn't really change anything on the corn, but you could tell in the 60-inch spacing the beans are thicker and lusher. It was nice that the beans were there because I didn't have any weed competition come in hardly at all. But canopied out and covered the ground nice.
So what well, we're into silage time now, Lyle, but what kind of growing season did you guys have? What were you seeing for rain? When did you get the crop in the ground? That kind of thing.
We had lots of moisture from the snow. We had like 3 feet of snow, and none of it ran off. Our ground wasn't frozen, so that was a blessing. But after that, we only had about 3.5 inches of rain, but it was spread out nicely. So I bought the planter this spring, and I was waiting on parts. So we actually didn't get the corn or the beans in. I seeded the beans first with the air seeder, and then went in right after with the planter. It was on June 7th, and we were lucky enough to get the early frost we usually do. So yeah, it all turned out the way it was supposed to. I had my fingers crossed for.
That never happens.
No, I know, I was worried when it got so late, but I had everything ready for it. So
So Lyle, what were you doing? Like you put the beans down with the air seeder. What were you using for fertility?
we put a layer of manure in, and then I had a blend of about 120 pounds of fertilizer. I forget the ratio of phos and nitrogen, but it was pretty high nitrogen.
Yep. And then you were putting that down. Did you put that down with the drill or broadcast it, or what was your strategy there?
We broadcasted it before I worked the manure and with the lempkin.
Cool. So what just moving to the silage here, what was the date on the silage, and yeah, what was kind of your observations? What did you have for issues?
It wasn't too bad. When we finally did get a frost, it was like -10, and it killed the beans inside the corn too. So I think we'd have picked up a little bit more beans, but they had wilted some. But you could still see the beans coming in the header, and I had no issues with it plugging up or anything like that. It all went in good. It feeded nice. I think the beans were about 35 inches tall, and then the corn was like 11 feet tall in that field. It was great.
It looks great. So what I mean, on an average spots, I mean, I just realized you sent me a picture of what it looked like in the canopy, but just talk about before you saw the frost, what you were seeing as far as when the beans grew, when the corn grew. Were they working in competition, or what were you seeing as far as, because yours was a little different. You were solid seeding the beans. I imagine your early checking was there's hardly enough beans here. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. You'd see the odd bean here and there and just one leaf, and the corn was taken off and the beans weren't. And I didn't know. I'd just keep waiting and seeing what happened. And then, yeah, we got another shot of rain and the corn really shot up and the beans started getting thicker and it just kind of went together from there.
So what date were you silaging this, Lyle?
It was late, like the end of October.
So what would have been the killing frost that took out the beans? Like what would that date have been roughly?
I think it was like October 25th or something like that.
Oh, so you like things were green right up until then?
Yeah, it stayed late this year.
Yeah, we could use another one of those.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? Can you remember the dates on these two photos?
That was the day we were silaging. It was about October 30th, I believe. I was kneeling down and I held the plant up to see how tall it actually was. And then when I was waiting for trucks, I just kept crawling out and checking it out because it was just neat the way it all kept growing together.
I hear you. So what did you do after silage, Lyle? Were you able to kick the cows out? And any observations from that?
Yeah, so this 20-acre piece, it was a corner of a field that's cut off by a big slough, and we hayed the slough. And we thought, well, we'd let the cows graze a second cut of slough hay out there. And they wouldn't stay in that slough. They kept coming out here, and we left them out there hoping that they'd eat the slough grass down more. And we ended up pulling them out because they ate the beans right down. It looked like we cultivated the field, and they just kept picking out there. We thought they were going to start eating dirt. So,
Well, I know Stu's got a similar story. The first time uh he silaged the corn beans. I was out there with him. We actually got a video coming up here. But yeah, Stu sent a picture a couple days after kicking the cows out, and it just looked like a regular old silage cornfield after. And in 2 days before, it was just lush green.
Yeah, they just loved them.
So what seeding direction did you go with for the corn, Lyle? And then what was your strategy with the seed direction on the beans?
I seeded the corn north and south. We seeded the beans at a bit of an angle just because my 10-inch spacing, I thought I would get a better cover between the rows.
Yep.
And but that picture with me and the boys standing beside the corn, that is on the north side of the field against the road, and the beans still did great there too. They would have been in the shade of everything, but
yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear. I had some questions preparing for this webinar about what would the percentage difference be if you sowed it north, south, or east, west. And well, maybe I can articulate that a little bit more. I'm assuming the person who asked is on. I think it depends on the year. Like if you're getting lots of moisture, I don't know if the difference would be that much. But definitely, it took me a long time to realize. But when you're intercropping corn, if you can get it north, south, somebody should do that, some scientific research on it. But my estimate is probably 30% or 40%. I don't know. Did you notice any difference on the headlands that were sown east-west as far as soybean growth?
to be honest, I didn't notice much of a difference. Maybe a little bit, but I thought it would have been more.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's why we get more people growing it and having us talk about it so we can learn this stuff. So anyway, Lyle, you got any final thoughts? Obviously, you're going to stick around for question period. We got some questions rolling in. But yeah, you got anything else just before we bring on Stu?
No, I don't know. It's pretty exciting to see how it all worked together, and I hope it works out like it did next year.
Well, we're going to come back to and chat about cat corn and open pollinated corn and non-GMO soybeans and some strategies there too. So stick around for question time, and great job. Much appreciated. Thanks for the pictures.
Thanks, you bet.
Okay, Stu, you're up. Seasoned vet talking about corn and beans. Well, most people that watch this webinar would be pretty familiar with my good buddy Darcy Stewart from my hometown in Clearwater, Manitoba. So truth be told, I get lots of credit for being an innovator, even though we're talking about just regular old corn and long season soybeans. But this is actually the mastermind behind it. Agribition, probably 3 years ago, I got a text from Stu saying there must be some long season Roundup Ready forage soybeans we can mix with corn. And I said, you're a smart man, Stu. I'm going to take all the credit. So how are you doing tonight? Maybe talk about a little bit about the herd you got riding in the combine with you, and a little bit about your operation for those of you, those in the audience that haven't heard about it.
First off, you give me too much credit for that. I think I asked you, why wouldn't it work with beans? And then you took it to the next level, which is it's been just fascinating to see how it's all evolved. But
you should be married to me. My wife can empathize with you.
So yeah, this is my family. My wife Shayna, and my son close there is Vaughn. Then there's Everly, Paxton, and my youngest Zan. We farm with my mom and dad and brother and his wife and their son Emmett. And yeah, we have a couple hundred cows that yeah, we cow calf, and yeah, times are good with them, I guess, right now. So it's a
Hang
lot
on
more
to
fun
the cow's tail.
yeah. A lot more fun having them this year than it has been the last few years. And then yeah, then we also have you know, 1,800 acres of cropland as well.
So Stu, you are the resident or the senior resident from a corn and intercropping standpoint. I like to think that we've grown together. It's super nice having somebody that's as interested in this topic, especially that's a neighbor, because it doubles the amount of experiments you can do. So rather than you doing all the shit or me going through all the shit, we get to hold each other's hand and then go through it together, which is awful nice if you don't have one of those guys in your life. So I know we got a few different previous years of corn here. So why don't you just talk about kind of how you got into it and what's going on here?
Yeah. So this the first picture on the left there, that was kind of my that was 2019. That was kind of when I learned that you could grow something with corn, and anybody who's on the webinar last year, I'm sure I've told this story before. It was July 6th, and it was a very spotty corn crop. And I needed to do something to get something. So I went, grabbed everything out of the shop, threw it in the drill, blew it on the field, harrowed it in. Luckily enough, we got a rain afterwards, and just a massive growth came after that. Unfortunately, October 12th, we got a snowstorm, and we didn't get to see the full potential of it as far as silaging it. But the residue is still there, and it's been paying off in that field ever since. And it's been yeah, it was just really something to see. And then the next two photos, and you guys were talking about north, south, and east, west seeding. The one with my son Vaughn, that's 2020, and the photo after that as well, it's from 22. Those are both seeded east west.
Looks
And
like 60-inch though, eh?
yeah, those are 60-inch corn. But you can tell Vaughn is on the north side of that row. The vetch is quite a bit higher.
You can see the shade on the south side of the row.
Yeah, and so that was the one thing we kind of noticed, and you and I talked about that quite a bit too. Just those plants, they were climbing that much higher and trying to reach for that sunlight that much more on the north side and compared to the south side where it was in the shade. But yeah, that it was. This really is what got me hooked on, growing as much biomass with the corn and trying to get the best of both worlds as far as working our cattle into it as well.
Because you guys are doing a few different things with the corn. You are combining corn as well as taking the corn for silage and obviously residue grazing, both those practices. Just talk a little bit about, maybe touch on hairy vetch quick, which I think is an excellent corn intercrop. And truth be told, we mix a few pounds of hairy vetch in with our forage soybeans as well to go in. And it just seems to be a really nice blend of plants, because the problem with vetch on a dry year is you don't see the vetch, and vetch on a wet year, it can turn into quite a beast now, can't it? But just talk about either, I know you still do some vetch with the corn as well, but just maybe talk about that practice as well, Stu. Just if you're still using vetch and at what rates and what you see basically.
So this year we didn't use any hairy vetch with our corn, and anything that we silage going forward, I'm still going to throw in, 5 pounds of it just to have something in it. And the reason being is we took that corn silage off, I think early September this year. Drought wasn't great, but then we had a whole bunch of great growing days afterwards, and the beans they didn't grow. So the idea would be to keep that hairy vetch in there. Our forage harvester has little to no issues with it, so having it in there as well, I don't think will be an issue, or it hasn't been an issue in the past. You're right though. It is a fickle thing, because when it works,
It's amazing.
it's this.
Yeah,
But
it's crazy.
we've we've had too many years where I shouldn't say too many years. We've only been doing this for a few, but we've had enough years where it's just so hard to get this again. And that I imagine this is what doing cocaine's like. Yeah, I'm always going to be chasing that high, but it really set things in motion. And what I like about the beans is they're kind of just easy.
Yeah.
You plant them and
I've told you this, a friend of mine, not in confidence, but an ethical dilemma, which is, I got into plant diversity and cover cropping. Our goal is to solve problems on farm with plant diversity. It doesn't really get me out of bed in the morning, getting really excited to make glyphosate tolerant plants more digestible on farms. But what it is it's a first stepping stone into soil health. We've got a cereal, we've got a vegetative legume. We can fixate nitrogen, we can keep stable soil aggregates. Like, it really is a very, very palatable, easy way to take your first stab at intercropping. Trust me, my first stab at intercropping, one, wasn't this simple, and two, did not go nearly this well. And I've been friends with you long enough to know we've had a couple learning experiences along the way, haven't we?
Yeah, for sure. It's I mean, that's why we do it. It's fun, and you can if you can't take something away from every year, then it's
only a mistake if you do it twice, according to Gabe Brown,
Wow.
which I do like that saying. It's a learning opportunity. So Stu, talk about what's going on here. Can assuming that's picked up okay?
Yeah. No, I'm not. Is there supposed to be a video here, or?
We had to remove all the videos just for size of download. It was going to take too long, so they don't really show up super, but the magic of editing, I'm going to click my fingers and Keegan's going to put the actual video in here. So sorry for you folks watching live, but if you watch it again, you'll get to see all the videos.
Magic of internet.
Isn't it wild?
So this is our first crack at taking a corn and bean crop off at the as for silage. This was 2022. We just did 25 acres of it, and I wish we had 300 acres of it. It just worked phenomenal. Well, you took the picture here, obviously, or because it wasn't me. And
actually, I took this one too.
So we planted this at 16,000 plants for the corn. Which we probably gave up a little bit on tonnage for sure. But I just kind of wanted to see what it would do. But it gave the beans just so much space to really, branch out and kind of really fill in the empty spaces.
What were you doing for fertility here, Stu? And I guess actually I know the answer to this. It's going to come with a caveat, but what did you do this year, and what did you do in 23 as far as fertility?
on this field, or like overall?
Sorry, on this field, and then kind of what are you doing going forward?
So this field, the contact, or we didn't.
Context is very important. You didn't use any fertilizer is the answer.
Oh, it has seen a pile of cow shit over the years. We've fed there for years. we'd grazed cover crops on it for the 2 years previous. So I just, I don't
The
know.
caveat is this was a from a soil health perspective, this was a very well managed field, is what I'm saying.
We so we actually did a Haney test for the first time on it last year, and we've never really worried about them a whole lot, but I'm getting kind of curious and see what it's all about. But it blew our soil health score out of all of our other fields. Just wasn't even close. So yeah, I think it was like 40, and everything else was in that 12 to 15. So that's kind of yeah. So it was really good. But yeah, yeah. So that field we didn't use anything. This year, we had a field where I tried doing none as well. Didn't put any fertility down. Um, the lesson learned. I don't know if we're quite ready to do that across the board. Definitely
No,
want to.
and well, and let me give a little bit of context too. I mean, the reason why I like the idea so much of the vegetative soybean with the corn is because that was one thing hairy vetch wasn't offering. Most of the hairy vetch growth was coming after the corn nitrogen need was gone. Basically, the crop was tasseling, and the beans or the vetch was just tiny. And we've used time-lapse cameras with the corn beans, sitting in trials, looking at the front of trials. And once you watch an entire growing season in a minute, you kind of understand why those beans just cannot photosynthesize enough to produce the type of energy needed to capture the amount of nitrogen the corn is going to need to put on that amount of growth. Like in the summertime, the corn's growing a foot a week. Maybe more, and the beans are like this big, and they're shaded 18 hours a day. Really, where we see the bean growth come on is after the corn is tasseled. Those beans have established enough of a root system. There's starting to be a little bit more sunlight that's able to penetrate the canopy, and their just conditions are most ideal for that crop. It can now if there's precipitation, it can, has its run on the amount of water it wants to uptake. And it's got enough vegetation there that vegetation promotes vegetation. So the problem is the seasons don't line up perfectly. And I think if they did, we'd be having a different conversation about how horrendously the beans decrease the yield of the corn. And that's why we're not having that conversation, is that the seasons don't line up perfectly, which is a disadvantage in some events, but is an advantage for other things as well.
For sure. So yeah, and that's kind of why we're gonna go quite a bit heavier than last year. We used 40 pounds of N and I think 10 pounds of sulfur was. So yeah, and that still wasn't enough. If we're using a lot of compost and other things, I think that would go a long ways. But yeah, and then it becomes a bit of a you know how you gotta 3 passes over the field, or just a management issue of getting everything down. It does become a bit of a challenge for sure.
For sure. So what's
So
going on after silage? What's going on after harvest?
so both these pictures are actually after grain harvest, after combined. But yeah, just I mean, this is a special year, I guess, as far as grazing cattle, because my dad tells me this won't work every year. And maybe he's right. But
My dad says the same thing, but our dads are friends too.
yeah, they're probably texting about us right now. So yeah, it was a good year, as far as we didn't get a whole lot of snow. But my argument always is to dad is, they were out there before the snow came. We didn't worry about anything. We didn't feed them anything, and they were able to graze right through on into the new year. So and they did really well. So it just it works really well. You have in this case we had 60 to 75 days of feed, and then a corn crop to go along with it. it just seems to pair really, really nicely together.
Yeah, the economics, if you've come to a presentation of mine in the last few months, I've just run through the economics of our shitty corn crop because it was not spectacular. It went like 95, bushels to the acre. But we sold all of it wet off the combine. We got $7 a bushel exactly for it. And then we grazed 200 head of cows, and we were kind of selling cows in and amongst the same time, but call it between 200 and 150 calves for 3 months, no feed. I shouldn't say that. We gave the cows 40 bales that we had to force feed them so we could move them onto other corn ground. But it was just amazing. Like to Stefan and Lyle's points, the cows just kept going back there, and yes, at that point it was December and those beans had shriveled up, but they're just going between the rows, licking up whatever's left for that leaf biomass.
You you wonder what they're eating, and people are driving by and you're wondering what they're thinking. But everybody came up and just kept saying good things about it, and it really, it's, you could give really hot feed right in front of them and they'd still go out there. It was pretty amazing to see.
Well, I'll tell my
I can't
story.
believe you're
What's that?
I was going to say, I can't believe you're telling everybody about your $7 corn when everybody's probably depressed about what the prices are
fine.
now.
It's the one time in my farming career when I've come on the right side of a grain marketing deal. I've told people for years, I'm like, you want my best grain marketing advice? Figure out when I sell and don't sell a month before or a month after, because that will be guaranteed market low. Well, Stu, we are wildly over time as per usual with this little webinar. So I do want to spend time for some questions because we do have a ton of questions out there. So this is what your silage looked like, basically coming from, this was a video too, which is too bad that people can't see it, but just showing if you remembered what the field looked like when you silaged it, the color, and then obviously the green flakes from the soybeans in there as well. Yeah, that's all I got for you. And we've gone well over, but Stefon, Lyle, and Stu, I'm like, great presentations, and I want to open this up for questions because we've had so many. I just want to remind everyone, we are a seed company, and to keep the lights on, we are in fact selling seed. If you are looking for forage soybeans, there's price discount until March 15th. Check out our website or check out the local dealer. Got a lot more information, pricing, trials, stuff like that too. So check that out. I'm going to stop share. If you guys want to turn your mics and video on, I'm going to start off with a few questions to spin around the circle for you guys. Basically, I want to know what you're doing differently or what your plan is for next year as far as improvement, or, is everything perfect? That could be seed depth or fertilizer, silage timing, grazing timing. What is something you want to actually improve with the intercrop starting next year? So we'll start with Lyle and then Stefon and then you, Stu.
I want to seed earlier next year.
Me too.
Yeah, I was just lucky that I didn't get an early frost because usually we do. But yeah, otherwise I'll probably leave. If I can get manure out on the field again, I'll do that and keep their fertilizer where it was. Everything seemed to pan out that way. And then I always grow a little bit of cat corn, so I want to try the non-GMO soybeans with that and see how it turns out.
Okay, Lyle, when it comes around to me, I'll talk about that as well. Stefon?
I'll probably seed some more soybeans, a few more acres. I liked it enough, and I guess a few things different. Would maybe do a better job of just scouting. This is more maybe just general agronomics, is scouting a little bit closer for that weed pressure. And if I think that there's some harder to kill weeds, use something in addition to the glyphosate just to get on top of it a little bit early. That's maybe not impacting the soybeans as much as it is impacting the corn. But other than that, yeah, pretty happy with how it all went overall. So I guess on the fertilizer thing, just with soil test samples. I didn't really adjust the fertilizer at all. I just, yeah, for what this, my goal was on the corn for tonnage, and didn't really account for anything coming from the soybeans. So just left it like that. And I do that again to, yeah, just make sure that the corn's getting what it needs to get fed. So
Stefon, just before we kick it over to Stu, and I'll throw it to Stu as well. Did you, well, I guess Lyle, if you've got anything to add on this as well, anybody take a shovel out and notice, notice when digging it up, no nodulation on the beans, or notice when the beans started nodulating, kind of based on the fertilizer rate?
I did not. I never really knew about that, but I'm planning on digging stuff up next year and checking everything out better now that I'm learning a bit more.
Nice. Stefon?
Oh, I was too lazy to drag a shovel out, so I just ripped plants out and didn't see much nodulation. But I was also wondering after the fact how much stayed in the ground.
Yeah,
So
I say that, but it's really hard. I was digging up one square, or 1 foot cubed, so a foot by a foot by a foot deep, and then I soaked everything, and it was just impossible to get those roots out and keep those nodules on. But after we had about an inch of rain, sometime mid-September, I was able to just go yank a plant out of the ground and saw some beautiful nodules on it. So I made sure I took about 1,000 videos of that. But Stu, I know you're a bit of a gopher when it comes to summer. Have you noticed anything as far as nodulation?
Yeah, I was gonna say I was digging around late July, early August, and yeah, they were really starting to take off then. I probably did more digging then than I did, later in the season. But yeah, not a lot of rain, which was kind of the year before. Yeah, you go out there early on, and there's quite a few more nodules out there, and looked really good. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, Stu, I guess I give it to the other guys. They got to say what they're planning for next year. What crazy ideas are you working on?
Okay, well, I'm gonna change up how we. Well, I shouldn't say I. I had this thought today when I was thinking about tonight, but I think we're gonna, ban the fertilizer down. Last year we broadcasted it, banned it, and then plant the corn with the planter, and then come back and plant it with plant the beans with the planter as well. Um, so that's kind of how we're going to change up the seeding and stuff. I've kind of gone down a rabbit hole with trace minerals and different things this winter. So I would like to try, some foliar applications and different things like that, as far as maybe trying to get a little extra, maybe not with the yield, but with the feed quality afterwards, on the stalks or whatever. But that's kind of I got to talk to my sprayer guy about that too, and they've all got to be on board. And I think the big thing is I really thought last year I'd get away with one pass of herbicide, and waited and waited and waited, and I think that was probably a mistake. Hindsight. So probably try and hit it earlier and just bite the bullet and do it twice. Maybe it'll work out, timing and everything, that once will be enough. But
Cool. Well, you guys, I got to give a caveat here. I just sat down in this restaurant in a panic, and I'm nowhere close to a plug-in, and my 10% battery just came on. So if I go black, my apologies, but that's going to be the end of the webinar. And I would say there's a decent chance. So I'm going to keep asking some questions. I apologize to all the people that had questions and the presentation went long. That is 100% my bad. And I told you the story about trying to find Wi-Fi. It was, I do have my charger with me, but I'm in a busy restaurant currently. So when this laptop dies, that's going to be it for the webinar tonight. But just touch on you guys. We've had a ton of questions about grazing corn. I know all of you guys are doing grain corn, but get a ton of questions about what do you think these beans would do in a grazing situation, and then maybe we'll double that up too with just, I know Stefon, we touched on it a bit, Lyle touched on it a bit, but just your strategies grazing after silaging the crop. So we'll go reverse order, Stu, Stefon, and then Lyle. But yeah, Stu, just give your best advice for somebody that's thinking about doing this corn grazing without silage or grain. And then what's your strategy when you're kicking cows out on bean residue?
So I guess, yeah, my advice would be to get them out there soon. Like, don't wait till the middle of winter and 3 feet of snow. If a calf or cow's got a calf on a hip or something, might be a better time to get them out there earlier. And then, so as far as my strategy after combining, it is depends on the year. For silage, it is kick them out. If I see a frost in the forecast, get them out there. If it's after combining, uh, then it is, unless I see snow or unless we need the feed, I kind of just wait as long as I possibly can.
Stefan?
Yeah, I guess I'd say do there that I don't think you'd want to wait too long on grazing the soybeans just for how quick they drop those leaves, and if you get a little bit of snow cover on top of those leaves on the ground, I think that'd be lost until, I guess, maybe till next spring they'd open up. But and then, like, for my, I guess I had just one concern that I thought of was kicking those cows out on those lush soybeans right after that, just comparing with a idea kicking cows out on, high protein alfalfa. So I just used some of the same methods for controlling that. Is I made sure the cows, they had full bellies when they went out, and made sure that those soybeans had dry leaves too. So just a couple things to just mitigate some bloat risk. I don't know if the bloat is an issue, but just something that I thought would be a safe thing to do.
Lyle?
I'm in the same boat. Get them out there right away. For us, it's wildlife. We have so many elk out here. We quit grazing corn and we put it in a pit in a big fence because we know we got it. Otherwise, last year they chased our cows out. We could not get our cows back out there, so we lost 40 acres of grazing corn we planned to graze. And the way the cows went after the beans and our horses, when we chased the cows out there, I imagine the elk would fight the cows off of that too. So if you have wildlife.
Yeah, Stu, go ahead.
Yeah, just in a grazing situation, that'd be a great time to throw some hairy vetch in there.
Good, really great
something
point. Yeah, the hairy vetch really holds on to its palatability right into winter. If you get this much snow, it's no big deal. As long as the cows know it's down there, they'll go get it. This much snow, it becomes more of an issue. But yeah, I tell producers the same things too, that a little bit of hairy vetch mixed in with that intercrop, I mean, can really incentivize the cows to go down and actually find it. Okay, you guys, I got I'm down to 3% battery, so I'm assuming I've got time for one more question. Yeah, just wondering, I mean, if you guys haven't soil tested, I mean, that's all good. But we are a soil health company, and Stu, I'm going to start with you as far as your observations, because I know you've done some of the infiltration tests. We did have somebody reach out and say, I've heard the land improvements with the intercrop are substantial. Stefon, I mean, you had a great story. You can retouch on that. But Stu, what are you seeing as far as water infiltration differences between corn crop with the intercrop and a living root versus monocrop corn?
Okay, well, I guess the biggest thing is just observation when you're out chopping or combining, that there's nothing in between the rows, and you get some rain, there's mud sticking to your tires and getting in the pit, and it just makes a mess of everything. You add that bean or hairy vetch in there, and all of a sudden it stays cooler longer, and goes into the ground a little bit quicker. We've done some tests, and yeah, it is noticeable, especially on that 60-inch that we did a few years ago. Like we're talking under a minute and under 5 for sure.
Cool. Stefan?
Yeah, just I guess touching on my point there with the difference in the headland and where there was monocrop corn, and then out in the middle of the crop where the soybeans were, that just that 3/10 of rain and a hot day, how much like water was conserved in that, and how damp that soil stayed on top. And I guess just just common sense too, that as you're going into spring and some heavy runoffs that could happen, that a few extra roots in the ground and a few extra stems to stop some erosion isn't a bad thing either. So
Cool. Lyle? You there, Lyle? Well, we'll back up on Lyle, you guys. I want to get to my final question, which we haven't touched enough on all these questions, to be honest, but there's lots of people out there that are, change is hard, and it is a new practice, and there are just so many questions, and I don't want to call them pushbacks, but there's questions on the practice about, what could go wrong, right? It's kind of human nature. Maybe Stefan, we'll start with you, then Stu, then you, and then Lyle, if you can hear us, we'll get your thoughts. But what's your best advice from somebody that's thinking about trying it? Maybe they're going to do it on 20 acres or half the field, but what's your best advice as far as somebody that's thinking about doing it? Stefan, we'll start with you.
well, I think it's just trying to maximize your like agronomy on all the parts. Like it's trying to grow a good corn crop, and the soybeans I feel like will just fit right in there. But it's just using the best management practices that you can to, if you're growing good corn, I don't know if there would be an issue growing the soybeans. So
Great.
I guess and then I guess
All good.
thought, one comment I had on the yield, that I guess that was my biggest concern too, and you'll hear that over and over again. I asked Joe too when I was thinking about this, in the local covers and co-rep, about like how couldn't it just like you see a little bit of volunteer canola grow beside a corn plant, and that corn plant is stunted in half, and how couldn't it be a thing? But it's just actually amazing how little impact it does have on your corn. And I grew, it was a historically dry year, and it was the best yielding corn crop that I've ever grown. So
Great. Stu?
Yeah, I guess this change is scary, but what is it? I think you had $35 an acre. Most watersheds right now are offering that $35 an acre for interseeding or intercropping or whatever. So the risk on the seed cost is really low if you treat your corn crop exactly the same. It's another Passover, but I think I think you'll see it in your feed. You'll see it in quite your soil health and everything else. And the risk is actually pretty minimal when you factor in it's a little bit of paperwork, but the seed will be paid for, and just try some. It's reach out. You guys can put my email in here or phone number or whatever, and if somebody wants to ask questions, I'm more than happy to chat about this stuff too. And
Be careful what you wish for, Stu.
Maybe don't put my phone number out there. You start with an email.
I'm just teasing.
But, it's there. I think the benefits are just so great that it makes sense, even if you don't have livestock. Honestly, it just we're going to follow up our corn with that we combined. We're going to follow it up with oats next year, and we're going to. I'll do some soil sampling, but I'm positive we're going to cut way back on our fertilizer with it as well. So
cool. Lyle, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
just best advice for somebody that's thinking about kicking the tires or trying this. What do you wish somebody told you?
I don't know. Like my dad and my wife, they're like, I don't know, corn isn't like competition. That well, I'm trying some. I put it on 20 acres, and my dad said order it for all our corn acres next year. We're putting it on the whole quarter, and my wife's getting on board. That it sure turned out this year. Let's see what happens next year. If you're thinking about it, try a bit. What's it hurt?
That's great advice. If you're thinking, just try it on 10 acres.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't have to do it all.
Well, and I mean, I don't want to speak for you, Lyle or Stefan. I know Stu, I can't speak for you. If you're not doing anything like that on the farm, you'll spend more time checking that crop than all the other crop together, because it's just so interesting. And I mean, if we can't be interested and curious in farming, it's like, well, I don't want to farm. I mean, that's just so fun and exciting to see a practice that, is successfully implemented and that can add value to the farm. And the goal of it is as one of the creators of the blend is to just stimulate your curiosity and to open your eyes to what other intercrops might be possible on your farm. So yeah, I love it because it's a easy, most of the time a slam dunk intercrop, and it really gets the mind buzzing when you're out there, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah.
Well, you guys, I'm officially at 0% battery, and to the best of my knowledge, I'm still with you. So let's call this a successful webinar. I'm very sorry to the people that asked questions. There are literally 40 questions between the signups and what we had tonight, but send us an email if you got any questions. Our webinar from last year is online. You can watch this one probably tomorrow, which is March 5th, 2024. I really want to thank our panelists. Great job, you guys. Discussion went long, as I knew it would, but this is an interesting topic. Really sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions, but yeah, thanks a lot for being on, you guys. I really appreciate it, and have a great night.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll see you guys.
Thank you.